The war in Ukraine has changed the world. And now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project Reinforce UA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on reinforceua.com.
Доброго дня, колеги. Я Вячеслав Покатило і від імені бізнес-школи МІМ вітаю вас на проєкті Reinforce UA. Цей проєкт англомовний і всім учасникам, кому потрібен переклад, я рекомендую натиснути кнопочку Interpretation внизу вашого екрану. Dear colleagues and friends, both in Ukraine and worldwide, I am Vyacheslav Pokatil, and on behalf of MIM Business School, welcome you on Reinforce UA project. We introduced this project already almost half a year ago in order to inspire Ukrainian business community and to bring world-renowned intellectual to share their opinion about the challenges the world is facing. This project became possible due to the general support of Bogdan Havrilshin Family Foundation, 50 Thinkers organization, and 3 major business associations, AACSB, AMBA, and EFMD. We are grateful for all donations you've made when registering for the project and remind that all collected money will be transferred to support Ukrainian women, temporarily displaced Ukrainian women who would like to start their own businesses. Before introducing you our today's guests, I'd like to remind you that the lecture will be recorded and will be available afterwards on this site, on other platforms. And you will be able to ask questions at the end of the session. For this purpose, I kindly ask you to use Q&A button rather than chat. And now I'm honored to welcome Kaihan Krippendorff in our project. Kaihan is the founder and CEO of Outthinker, a think tank specialized in conducting research on business strategy, innovation, and technology, and building corporate communities. He's a founder of the Outthinker Strategy Network, a global peer network of senior strategy executives focused on helping to solve problems, pressing challenges, and staying ahead of the pace of change. Kaihan is passionate about helping people and organizations to develop the skills and mindset needed not only to survive, but to thrive at the fast-paced digital and agile future. And we're very happy, Kaihan, to have you today with us. And I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be here. I'll present for 35 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for Q&A. But please do ask questions using the QA area as they come up. So what we're going to be talking about is outthinking the competition and going into both the science of how great innovators outthink the competition. And also, I'm going to provide you with 3 steps that you can take and apply in your business, whether that's a startup or an established business, to help you generate some different types of ideas. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a QR code. And with that QR code, you'll have an access to this presentation. This is based off of a book that I wrote. I've written 5 books, and that book also comes with a workbook and an interactive, a self-paced online course. I'm giving you access to all of that for anyone that wants to take and apply this methodology. So I'm going to share my screen here. Great. Okay, great. So outthinking the competition. If we look at successful business innovators, what we find is they talk a lot about outthinking the competition, not only out executing the competition or outspending the competition, but coming up with a flow of ideas that competitors have difficulty keeping up with. This is Ray Kroc. He is the founder of McDonald's, and he wrote, "My attitude was that competition can copy my style, but they can't read my mind. So I'll leave them a mile and a half behind." So let's think about your success as being the result of a flow of ideas. The more ideas you have, the better. There are some ideas that are more valuable than other ideas. If these are ideas that your competitors will copy quickly, those are less valuable than ideas that competitors will take a long time to copy. And generally in strategy, we believe that a competitive advantage comes from doing what your competitors can't do. But that's absolutely not the case. We know that Yahoo could have bought Google. We know that Blockbuster could have bought Netflix. Rarely is it that your competitors can't do what you're doing. It is that they choose not to do it. So we're looking for an idea that creates this dynamic in your competition. All of the innovators that I studied describe this dynamic in different ways. My favorite phrasing of this dynamic that we're looking to create came from Gandhi. He said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So what we want to do is do something that our competitors will ignore and laugh at. That gives us a gap to continue growing it. And by the time they wake up and say, wait a second, that strategy is actually going to work, it's too late, we've already won. We have called this lots of different things over the years. Sun Tzu, the Chinese general that wrote The Art of War, he called it taking whole. Your enemy just lets you take them and there's no fighting. We can call it the blue ocean. We can call it disruption. We've called it different things over the millennia, but it's all one concept. And for today, I encourage you to call it the fourth option. So this is a metaphor that we found very helpful. And the idea is that 3 represents the point at which others have stopped looking for new options. When your competitors say, I've been in this industry for 30 years, and what you need to do is A, B, C. When they tell you the key success factors to running that business are 1, 2, 3, it means they've stopped looking for new options. And what you want to do is look beyond that and find a fourth option. One example of what it feels like to compete with someone who introduces a fourth option. To illustrate this, let's go back in time in China. And the way that wealthy people entertained themselves is they raced horses. And there was one general who was frustrated because he kept losing to the prince. He asked an advisor for help, and the advisor observed the matches and said, this is a very simple game. You basically race 3 sets of horses, your fastest, your medium, your slowest, as a result of which there are 3 ways to win this game. You need to have better horses, better riders, or provide better care and feeding. And your challenge is that because the prince has more money than you, he can buy better horses, he can hire better riders, and he can provide better care and feeding. But I see a fourth option, the advisor tells the general. Let's challenge the prince to one last competition. Let's do it in 2 weeks. Let's invite the entire town and your family. The general is a little nervous about this, but he trusts his advisor and he does as he's told. And a week from Thursday, the town is empty. Everybody is in the stadium, excited about this race. Everyone's chattering away. And then the drums roll, indicating that people should go quiet. And the sequence begins. The prince prepares his best horses. They walk up to the gate. The general prepares his best horses. And the advisor says, wait. If you play the game the way you've always played, we know what the outcome will be. To change the outcome, we need to change the way we play the game. I want you to race your slowest horses first. And that changes the outcome of the game. In all strategic areas, we see the same pattern. Before 1968, there were 3 ways to go over high bars. And then a gentleman named Dick Fosbury went over backward and he won the Olympics. It took the competition 8 years to copy him. 8 years later, 90% of high jumpers are doing what's now called the Fosbury flop. But there are 2 points I want to illustrate from this case example here. The first is there's no new technology that suddenly appears in 1968 to enable people to go over backward. The technology are simply pads put on the other side of high bars, and we were already laying down those pads 15 years before. Now, we're not talking about pads here, right? We're going to be talking about blockchain, IoT, artificial intelligence, but it is not the existence of the technology that slows down the adoption. It is instead the concept around the technology. And it's not till that concept is named, not till we have the term Fosbury flop. Before you have that concept, you cannot get a manual on how to do the Fosbury flop. You cannot call a coach and say, can you teach me the Fosbury flop? So I'm going to introduce you to 5 emerging strategic concepts that allow us to use technologies differently, and that will reveal fourth options. Second thing I want to point out here is what makes these fourth options work, what makes them disruptive, is that competitors ignore and laugh at them. Before 1968, every gold medal winner had gone over forward. Every trainer of every Olympic athlete had trained them to go over forward. Massive agreement that the way you go over is forward. So as you come up with ideas here, and 95% of people who go through this version of the workshop that I'm sharing with you, 95% of them say afterwards, they have an idea that could be transformative to their business that they didn't have before. So very high probability you're going to come up with a fourth option. The way you will know it's a fourth option is if it makes you want to ignore and laugh at it. Now, we are not, when is the right time to come up with fourth options? I propose right now is the ideal time to come up with fourth options, because when the rules change, it allows you to play differently. If we look at the average height of the last 5 NBA most valuable players, what we'll see is for 2.5 decades, they were getting taller and taller and taller. And then after 1980, something strange happens. For the next 5 years, they're shorter. Let's see if this is an anomaly. Actually, if we play it forward, it's not an anomaly. It's actually a new trend. The best players are getting shorter. What changed was a rule. The NBA introduced a 3-point line, which gives you 3 points instead of 2 if you shoot from further away. Some teams adapt to the new game, others do not. Some players adapt to the new game, others do not. And we are facing, and particularly you are facing, a radical rule change. As was mentioned earlier, we organize a peer group of chief strategy officers from across lots of sectors, and we get together and we discuss what are the trends that they're concerned with. And these are the top trends that chief strategy officers are concerned with today. Next generation, customers, partners, employees, digital transformation, the ability to provide personalization at scale, tech substitutes for physical products, cybersecurity risk, blockchain technologies, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, person-to-person and platform business models, IoT connected devices, political, geopolitical uncertainty, and a steady decline in loyalty of employees to companies and as customers to providers. And what COVID has done has accelerated these things. What the war has done is accelerated these things. And it really puts us now at a moment in time where we have to choose, how are we going to play the game? Are we going to keep playing the old game, or are we going to play the new game? Do we keep going over the high bar forward, or do we learn to go over the high bar backward? Assuming that you want to learn to play a new game, the question is, how do we generate fourth options that give us the new game? I'm going to suggest 3 steps that you can take for your business to generate fourth options that will make your competitors ignore and laugh at them. Step 1 is going to be explore 8 dimensions of your business model. Step 2 is going to be generate a lot of options using 5 strategic patterns. And the last is a 3-step process to embrace crazy ideas. First, let's talk about the 8 dimensions. There is a trick to scaling rapidly. Companies often take a long time to figure out this trick. Apple took 30 years to figure out this trick. Amazon, by comparison, figured out the trick much earlier. Amazon, if we look at Amazon and Apple's revenue at the point of founding, what we see is that Amazon started scaling much more rapidly than Apple. So what the trick is to look for fourth options across lots and lots of dimensions of your business model. You know, Amazon has payment innovations. They have distribution innovations, operational innovations, employee recruitment innovations. And so what we want to do is we want to look through exhaustively through at least 8 different dimensions. So what I invite you to do is think about your business now and ask, which of these 8 dimensions would be most promising for me to find fourth options in today? By the way, they all have P's in them. So there's 8 P's. I believe all models are wrong. Some are useful. I'm not saying this is magic. You know, I made them spell P's to make it easy to remember. So there might be a 9th P, but I'll tell you, we use this with many top strategists and chief marketing officers from companies of all sizes, and it really opens up our thinking. So one thing you could focus on is positioning. Who is your core customer? And what does your brand mean to them? If you brought your growth challenge to a branding agency, they would be focusing on positioning. Once you understand who your core customer is and what the need is that you want to provide, then you want to think about your product. What is unique about your product? What product or service attributes do we excel on? And we excel on those by underperforming in other ones. Pricing strategy. What new pricing model might we consider? New way to monetize or deciding who pays? The great thing about pricing is if you can get an incremental improvement in pricing, since there's rarely any cost associated with it, it goes straight to the bottom line. So it's a much more profitable lever than some of the other ones. What about the physical experience? What do your customers see, smell, hear, taste, touch, feel when they interact with your product or service or brand? Could you innovate the physical experience? Placement. Through what channels and what means do you distribute your value proposition? What geographies, online, offline, which side of the street, which distribution partners? Very powerful place. And many great companies were founded simply on a placement innovation. Michael Dell, for example, was the first to sell computers directly to consumers, and he created what was at one point the largest PC company in the world from that one innovation. Promotion. What marketing and sales tactics should we be using to get customers or users through the funnel? And then we have 2 foundational ones, which are your processes. What key processes do we run? How do we operate? Maybe you should be working on your execution rhythm or your execution approach. And then finally, we have people. Who do we recruit? How do we organize? What's our incentive structure? What are our values? Each of these is like a door that could open up a world of possible fourth options. And what you don't have time to do is look at all of them, but you want to think strategically about which ones are most useful to focus on now. So that was step 1, explore these 8 dimensions. Now you've chosen which ones to focus on. And you now need to generate ideas. I'm just making this up, but for us right now, what we're focused on is a new product for a new positioning, a new type of person. And so we're going to be developing a new business line And so we've decided to focus on those two. The next thing to do is to come up with lots and lots of ideas. So the question in this phase is, how do great strategists come up with big ideas? This is Alexandra Kostanuik. When I interviewed her, she was the reigning women's world chess champion. And what she would do as a marketing stunt is challenge a whole town to play chess. And she would look at the board and she could see the winning move. If you saw the TV series produced by Netflix called Queen's Gambit, there's a great scene in that series in which the main character does the same thing. How can someone look at a board and see the winning move that you and I can't see? Well, it has to do with pattern recognition. And it's been measured that master chess players recognize twice as many patterns as experts, and grandmasters recognize 10 times as many. Now, we develop these patterns through our experience. You started a company, it was successful, and that embeds in your mind a particular strategic pattern that then you introduce into your next business and your next business. So we might have a playbook of 3 to 9 patterns, because that's how much memory a human has, 3 to 9 things. But there are 36 different patterns. The QR code that I'm giving you at the end of this has a workbook, and in the workbook, there's a list of all 36. These are the basis of my first 2 books. My doctorate work, which I did in Finland, was all based on this set of 36. We don't have time to go through 36, and you never do. But what we can do is we can make an informed guess about which are the strategic patterns that we should be using today by looking at companies that are really thriving in this fast-paced, digital, purpose-driven world. What patterns are they using? And if we want to get into it, I can explain the research basis of how this came to be. But let me say that the 5 patterns that are most important right now are these 5. And we're going to go through each of these. I'm going to give you some examples. I invite you to write down ideas as they come up for you. Maybe take out a piece of paper, maybe open up an email to send them to yourself. Whatever way is easy to capture ideas. Hopefully, you're just going to start generating ideas. And it's important that you capture every idea. You're looking for quantity of ideas, not quality of ideas. 7 ideas is not enough. We're talking 50 to 200 ideas. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to execute all 200, but the 5 that you end up executing, if they came from a list of 200, are much more likely to be the best ideas. So the first one is move early to the next battleground, which basically says skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck is. This is what Wayne Gretzky said. So what we want to talk about is playing for tomorrow and not just today. And this is important because cycle times are compressing. Technology adoption has been accelerating for a long time and now is accelerating even faster. It took ChatGPT 5 days to reach 1 million users. It took Netflix 7 years to reach 1 million users. So we're seeing adoptions of technologies accelerating, which means the kind of ideas that used to take a long time to reach us can reach us much more quickly. And people who move to the next battleground early gain an even greater first mover advantage than they have in the past. For example, there was a gentleman who was a pharmacist working at his dad's pharmacy, and he realized that the experience of, at least in the United States, of people getting prescription drugs was terrible, especially if you had multiple prescriptions, because you had to leave your home multiple times. You have the bottles, you couldn't open them. Compliance was low because people got confused. And he said, let's think about what is the next battleground. In the next battleground, you don't leave your home to get drugs. They get sent to you. And they don't get sent in a bottle by the manufacturer. You don't care about that. You want to know, what do I need to take at 8 a.m. on Monday? So these pills will already be pre-sorted into little plastic bags. On the top right of your screen, you'll see a little plastic bag. It says 8 a.m. on Monday. These are the 3 pills that the patient needs to take. Over the next 6 years, he rolls out this solution in 48 states of our 50. And on the 6th year, he sells it to Amazon for $1 billion. $1 billion in value creation from this kind of thinking. Where is the next battleground? And what could we do to move there early? One book I'm working on now suggests that if we want to understand the next battleground in many industries, what we should look to understand is proximity. So proximity, the idea is that the production and provision of value moves ever closer to the point of demand in time and space. Ultimately, we'll reach P equals 0. Your customer has a desire, and you produce and deliver against that desire at the moment that they have it. We see this trend across lots of sectors. For example, in the middle here is a soda machine created by Coca-Cola. It allows you to mix hundreds of different flavors. And the reason it can do this economically is because it doesn't create value in the bottling plant and then ship the bottles to the venue. It ships the syrup and mixes it at the moment that people need it. That's an example of proximity. To the right is an example of 3D printing food, which is a trend that I think that there's a lot of potential for. If we look at how food production has evolved, it's moving ever closer to the point of demand. Vertical farms, indoor farms, grown closer to where it's needed. Even Miele, the German appliance company, has a business now that produces vertical farms that are small enough to go into your kitchen. One of our clients imports plantains, and the idea that we're experimenting with is turning plantains into a paste that can be 3D printed. And we're working with a university to develop that technology. This is another example. This is a machine that is funded by the US government, the Department of Defense, Advanced Research and Defense. And what they are doing is showing that you can take basic basic elements, and you can combine them in this machine. It's about the size of a refrigerator to produce right now 15 different drugs. Now, what would it look like if you had something like this on a battlefield and you could produce drugs as needed? And since they're basic elements, the shelf life is infinite, much less inventory. So these are all examples of where the next battleground might be. So the question is, where is the next battleground in your space? What are the new customer needs? What are the future customer behaviors? What are the future technologies? Where will you find proximity in the future? What would it look like when P equals 0 in your space? So that's sort of an obvious one. When we think of strategy, the idea is we should be thinking ahead. We think of innovation, it's often about thinking ahead, but that's only one of the 5 patterns. The second pattern that we see emerging is called coordinate the uncoordinated. And basically says that there are new ways of coordinating, and that opens up new models. Think about power coming from coordination. Birds fly in flocks, fish swim in schools, animals travel in herds. They create power and safety by coordinating themselves. Platform business models like Uber and Airbnb, they don't own the things, they coordinate them. Blockchain technology allows us to now not only coordinate the ledgers, but coordinate the nodes that are coordinating the ledgers. So this is kind of the next order of coordination. IoT devices are allowing us to coordinate spaces in an entirely new way. We have smart homes, smart manufacturing plants, smart farms, smart construction sites, smart warehouses, smart hospitals, smart offices, smart cars, and entire cities becoming smart. And so what we're able to do is take information and pull it together to start creating something like a supermind in which this new broader thing is coordinated and in a way gets an identity. And so you are plugged into right now some smart space. And if you embrace really being part of that smart ecosystem, then you can create an advantage. These technologies are bringing down transaction costs and allowing humans to coordinate themselves in new ways. For example, I live in Miami right now in southern US. I moved here 6 months ago, and we had a moving company who was supposed to come and unpack things and install things. And they were just so slow that I started using an app to find people who could come and do electrical work, do carpentry work. And I found it much easier to coordinate them on my own than to try to use this centralized coordinated company. That's an example of a new organizing model. Hire is a Chinese company. It has grown in the last 5 years from 15 billion in revenue to 32 billion in revenue, most of that being organic growth. When you ask them why they've been so successful, they say, we changed the way we coordinate ourselves. Instead of having a hierarchy, we've broken the hierarchy down into 4,000 little companies. They call them micro enterprises. Each company has 5 to 10 people. Each company is run by a CEO. If the people who report to the CEO don't think the CEO is doing a good job, they can vote that CEO out and replace them. And then they thought, what about the support functions? What about IT? What about legal? What about R&D? We should break those down into small micro enterprises as well. And now they have to compete to sell their services internally. And if the IT department doesn't do a good enough job, is not competitive enough, then the internal users won't be hiring from that IT department. And effectively, the IT department's budgeting goes away. So this is just a very different way to think about coordinating internally. All of this, blockchain, platforms, these new organizational models, all of this is really just a broad strategic shift in which power comes increasingly from coordination rather than control. So the question you want to ask is, who or what would we like to coordinate? So you're playing for tomorrow rather than today. You're coordinating rather than controlling. You're already thinking very differently. But the next one that you want to look at is force a two-front battle. And the idea here is you need to decide what business you're really in. Peter Drucker, arguably the most influential management thinker of all times, he said strategy is the answer to the question, what business are we really in? And the answer is never easy to answer. So Tony Hsieh, he's the late CEO of Zappos, which was a shoe retailer that was online shoe retailer, was very popular here, eventually sold to Amazon. He would always say, we are not a shoe company. We're a customer service company that happens to sell shoes. Sorry about this. I'm getting a sort of like semi-urgent email from my daughter, and I'm just letting her know that I'm here, but I'm here with you for now, and I'll call her later. So this is very powerful because the people on your team think they're in an industry, and you can change the way they think by saying, no, we're not in an industry. We're defined in another way, and that other way has us think differently. 2 gentlemen left Google. They were looking to create a new business. The nephew of one of them gets cancer. And so this gentleman helps the nephew navigate through his appointments with doctors. And he realized this area of medicine is completely broken. When you see a doctor, they can't easily see what their past treatment of you was to be able to identify what types of treatments are working better than others. Then you go to another doctor, and that doctor doesn't know what the first doctor did. So they created a company called Flatiron Health. The mission is to improve lives by learning from the experience of every cancer patient. So they go to a doctor and then say, we have developed this practice management software company that can help you manage your practices more efficiently, but we're not a software company. We're actually a data company. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the data to understand patterns between treatments and outcomes. So that doctor signs up. They go to the next doctor, offer the same thing, but they say, we're going to also offer you insights to what that other doctor is doing so you can improve your outcomes. Now, oncologists, what they care about are the outcomes. So they jump at the chance to switch to their practice management software company. They sign up 2,000 different practices, and then they sell it to the French giant Roche Pharmaceuticals for $2.1 billion 7 years later. So $2.1 billion in value creation from this kind of thinking. Very powerful to consciously answer the question, what business are you really in? How would that kind of company behave differently? So we've got three lenses so far, right? We're playing for tomorrow rather than today. We're coordinating rather than controlling. We're not defining ourselves by our industry. Already, just those three will have you start seeing and choosing options that seem alien to your competition. The next one I want to put on your kind of visor is be good. The idea is that we're moving away from the idea that the company should exist just to maximize value for owners. Companies that are perceived to do that create resistance to their growth, and they create enemies. A smarter strategy is one that benefits multiple stakeholders. When your growth is good for the community, for employees, for the government, for the country, for the environment, for the world, and thereby shareholders, it is the ultimate strategy because you have no competition. My wife was the general counsel at MasterCard for a long time, and their CEO aligned the company behind this idea that it was a force for good. And that force for good strategy matched their business strategy. As a result of this, his stock price went up from $32 to $250 a share over his tenure. It's very powerful to align your growth between being good. And we're not just talking about messaging and putting out a strong mission, but aligning your business model, how you make money, to doing good. I buy my children stockpile gift cards for their birthdays. In fact, today is my son's 17th birthday. I'm going to buy him a card. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My family was fairly poor. And it's important to me that my children, when they get out in the world, they understand how to manage their finances. So I buy them these cards. And here's a short video of my daughter explaining why she decided to take her $50 and invest it in Amazon stock.
What you invest in?
Amazon. And the Amazon thing went up 91.67% higher.
Wow. For how long?
I don't know. And I got $9.17 more.
Nice. You made $9.17 without doing anything.
Yeah.
Wasn't that nice to make money without doing anything?
But look at how it goes.
Wow. Why did you invest in Amazon?
Because I like Amazon. Because I get toys and movies. Amazon Prime there.
So you figure it's a good company?
Yeah. Plus they bought Whole Foods.
Oh, good.
And I had it before they bought Whole Foods, so it went like.
So here I love, in this case, she was 12 years old here. Here's a girl talking about Amazon, not as a place just to buy things, but as an investor. And I'm so much more confident that when she starts making her own money and saving money, she's going to know how to manage finances. And this is the opportunity that we as entrepreneurs get to do. Design a business that can profitably solve a problem in the world. That's the invitation here. So last pattern, and then I'm going to go through my final point about embracing crazy ideas, and we'll wrap up. This last pattern is create something out of nothing. And it's really interesting. We tend to play the game of business following a rule that doesn't exist. And we follow this rule because it exists in most games that we play, in the West at least. You can't take a queen out of your back pocket and just put it on the board. You can't just add a piece to the board. You have to play with what's on the board. But there are other types of games. In some Asian countries, the analog to chess is Go. And in Go, the rules are the opposite. In Go, you cannot slide the pieces on the board. You can only add pieces and remove pieces. So what would it look like to play the game of growing your business like you would play Go? What would you like to add to the game? What if you could just add customers? Tony Fernandez did this. In 2001, he quit his job. He bought an airline. It cost 1 Malaysian ringgit, which is in US currency about 12 cents, sorry, 27 cents. It's now the second largest discount airline in the world. And his core idea was, I'm not going to compete for airline customers. I'm going to add new customers to the game. People who take railroads, for example, I'm going to create an offer that makes them want to instead take an airline. So whenever you see this kind of non-consumption, is what we call it, there's usually 4 reasons for this. So you want to look for where people are not using you or your competition. That's non-consumption. And then look to understand, is it price? They can't afford it, or they don't think they can afford it. Access, they can't get to it. You're not in their town. You're not on their way to work. Is it know-how? Maybe they feel intimidated. They don't know how to operate it. Or is it time? I'm just too busy to even talk to you. So look for non-consumption and unlock it. And the last application of this that I want to share with you is to create a category. Very powerful. Gatorade created the category of sports drink. Red Bull created the category of energy drink. If you can create a category, then it gives you a huge advantage. So the question is, who or what would you like to add to the game? What new customers, occasions, needs, categories? So you've asked these 5 questions. You've generated a lot of ideas. And the last tip I want to leave with you is how to embrace these crazy ideas. Because of those ideas, the ones that are most likely to be 4th options are going to look impossible, right? Remember, those ideas will be ones that your competitors are going to ignore and laugh at. They're going to ignore and laugh at it because it's inconsistent with some belief they hold. You probably have the same belief structure as them, so it will look impossible to you. How do you overcome that? Very simple. Take a tip from Albert Einstein, who said, it's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. So you want to stay with the seemingly impossible idea a little bit longer. 3 steps to do this. Take every idea. Maybe you've written them down on Post-it notes, or you have a numbered list and you transpose the numbers onto a 2x2 matrix. You say, is this easy to execute or difficult? And if we executed it, would it be high or low impact? You end up with 4 different types of ideas. You end up with some waste of time ideas, difficult, low impact ideas. And I'll give you a hint. If you include on your list things that you are already executing, you're likely to find that you are wasting time. Stop doing those things. You're going to end up with a bunch of tactics. Create a list and just take a few off every quarter or every month and execute them. You're going to end up with things that look like winning moves, but the 4th option usually appears in the 4th quadrant. It appears to be a crazy idea. And so it is really important that you circle some of those crazy ideas and work on them and see, how could we turn them into a winning move? And then you pick your priorities, which will include some 4th options. And what's going to happen? They will ignore and laugh at you. You'll put your slowest horses first, and they'll be so slow that none of them will cross the finish line before the prince's horses. Your father will get up and leave. Your children will hide their head in shame. Your friends are going to laugh at you and tell you you made a mistake, but you know that's the sign that you're on the path to a fourth option. So then you race your second horses, and your second horses, your fastest horses, you race them now. The prince is already running his fastest horses. He can't run them anymore. Your fastest horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's medium horses. And in the third heat, your medium horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's slowest horses. And for the first time ever, the general wins. So we have time for questions. Please ask them in the QA section. And this QR code, if you take a quick shot of it, it'll open up a document from which you can access all the material I mentioned, all of that free and open source to you. Thank you.
Great, Kaihan. Thank you very much. We still have some time for a couple of questions. May I start with a crazy one? For those who got these crazy ideas and reached the point when everybody laughed at them, and they still believe this is the idea which brings them to the winning point, but it won't. What you would recommend to these people who are just laughed out by their competitors and failed?
I see. So the idea actually wasn't going to work. Is that how you're reading it?
Well, it happened. It happened not to work.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I assume not all crazy ideas are good. Yes.
A good success rate is 15%. So even if you have a group of ideas, if you have a group of ideas that could be high potential crazy ideas, what you want to appreciate is that at most 15% are going to work. That's why you want to have a portfolio of ideas, and you want to reduce the cost of moving on those ideas. You take each of those ideas, and there are certain assumptions that have to be true. And then you want to run inexpensive experiments to test those things, but not just with one idea, but with 15 ideas. So
you need more than one crazy idea, if I understood correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
At any given time, you might pick. So if you have the 2x2 matrix, you have a whole bunch of crazy ideas. If you have 200 ideas on that matrix, you're going to end up with 30, 40, 50 crazy ideas. And then you circle one to work on this quarter. And then if it doesn't work, it's like a Scrum board. Take something off the backlog, work on it, and then either throw it away or continue working on it.
This next question is serious because you touched very practical approach, which actually assume that there are certain patterns, as you said, and there's a fixed amount of patterns, and there are more common, or let's say more successful, or more probable that you'll bring you to the success. Which, as another lecturer in our project once said, that strategy became a commodity. Strategy become a number of things, and the matter is just to select them. And then comes the question of those, crazy ideas, which are currently discussed very much indeed, and under the name of ChatGPT. Why do we need leaders, managers at all? Because it's just a matter of making a right choice.
Yeah, certainly. AI can help us make a choice. Right now, it can help us predict what the probability of outcomes will be, and increasingly, it helps us make judgment. But that is, what I think that is what leaders are paid for. But I agree that we're approaching. This is a little bit further out there. But with humans coordinating in new ways, we're able to think together more efficiently than the hierarchical model. And then you don't need a leader's judgment to make the choices. You can collectively make the choices. And there's certain types of choices that right now are better made in groups and individuals. When there's an idea, there's certain types of ideas that when you find the solution, it becomes obvious that is the right solution. Those types of ideas are well served by group problem solving and group decision. But there's some ideas that don't have that aspect, and then you might need authority to make a choice. I don't know if that makes sense.
You wrote the book, let's say, Innovating from Within.
Yes.
And you mentioned innovation, but not in this presentation, very particular. But I like their approach, and we have several discussions about this and presentations on this project as well. What you would recommend, or just very quickly, or just to outline, what does it mean to innovate from within, and what particularly leaders, managers of organizations should think of when managing or thinking of innovation?
Yes, yes. So innovating or acting entrepreneurially from inside an established organization requires some differences in approach. And in my research, I interviewed 150 internal innovators, and I found there are 7 main barriers that we need to overcome. My first point is that actually 70% of society's most impactful innovations have come from employees, not from entrepreneurs. The foundational breakthroughs, the internet, for example, advances in solar energy, are usually introduced by people inside established scaled companies, and then entrepreneurs will innovate on top of that. So we need to activate internal innovators. And there are 7 things. One is intent. You've got to get people to actually want to do it. The next is need. They have to understand what the company's strategies are, and most people aren't aware. The next is options. That's what we covered today. Generating lots and lots of options, not just one option, but 50 ideas, right? The next is, I call it value blockers, but it's really about understanding how to do business model design. And I know that you have a session, or you had a session on business model design here, in training people to do business model design so that we reduce the conflict between the business model of their idea and the business model of the company. The next is ACT, I call it, which is allowing people to conduct frugal experiments, take action on their ideas, even if they haven't gotten approval with a business plan and funding. The next is team, which is enabling cross-functional teams to form around ideas, which requires people to innovate across silos. And the last one is environment, there are certain well-known environmental organizational factors that suppress internal innovation. But this is all known, and companies can overcome all of these.
Next question is well, also not easy for me. You mentioned that one of the principles or approach to be good, and the idea is, let's say, it's not the profit is not as important as it used to be. Let me simplify and just somehow make it in such a way. And then coming back 50 years to Milton Friedman, for example, it was much easier at that time to link value creation of business and companies to, let's say, some kind of a personal, probably not very famous will to become rich, and that created huge values. Now, all companies, or big companies, or respectful companies, are no longer insist on making profit. You can become the richest person in the world running the company which made no profit for quite a long time, as we know.
I see.
That's the question. It also created cash in another way, but let's put it aside. What's the role, or what's the place of a profit, in your opinion, at present, the company, and which particular role it plays together with cost to strategy?
So I think that if we take a very long-term view, you then reconcile the tension between profit and good. And that if you really are thinking about what's my profit going to be 30 years from now, 40 years from now, you then make the socially correct choices. So I don't think that there has to be a choice. You don't have to choose and I think you had Roger Martin here as well. He says that you no longer get to choose between being profitable and doing good. I just interviewed a woman today from Pfizer. She's the head of corporate communications. And she was selling she was sharing about their decision on whether to serve the medical community and sell their products in Russia. And they have this moral dilemma, which is what she said. She said, look, a child with cancer in Russia is a child with cancer. And our mission is to have transformative impact on patients' lives. So, what they decided to do was not pull out of Russia, but take all of the profit that they earned there and put it in support of Ukrainian defense. I think that that's a smart, they see it's a smart view because they're taking a long view, right? They're not making a moral choice, and they're kind of sacrificing today's profit for future success. So, long way of saying, I think the reconciliation is as taking a long-term view and recognizing that a lot of the externalities, the pollution, creating floods, creating forest fires, there is a cost to that that's now being incorporated into the marketplace, and we're starting to see that those costs are getting incorporated into the calculations of strategic decision making.
Okay, not to mention, but another thought which appears, we speak quite a lot about, let's say, this newly appeared, if newly measured in dozens of years, companies like even Apple, only creation of 70s, less than 50 years, something like this. Amazon, much less. Facebook, even less. Google, etc., and use them as an examples of all those innovations, smartness, computerization, digitalizations, etc., etc., etc. There are still quite a lot of big, very important, the biggest company in the world, if you would look at the biggest one, they are in another industries and business which didn't look to make a lot of innovations in their business models, in their approaches and their goodies, etc., etc. So how we should treat this company? So meaning that in the future they will totally fail. Aramco and all other companies, and also the biggest Chinese company providing all this oil, petro business, petro economy will fail. So that's the approach. So we're just waiting until they will become miserable, and we'll start begging some money. Is this the future?
There's some sectors where innovation is not necessary for survival. If you have strong customer captivity, you have strong big scale advantages, or preferential access to inputs or resources, that is like a moat around your business. And there are a lot of companies who just have a moat around their fortress, but they don't have ships going out looking for new land. I think that eventually the fortress erodes if you only focus on protecting it. And I believe in innovation advances society, but I would say that it is true that these companies don't need to innovate in order to survive. I don't like that, but when barriers to entry are high, and there are a lot of companies that operate on that kind of monopolistic, traditional strategic approach of raising the walls on the fortress.
But then jump into the future. You showed a short video, and I assume it was your daughter. And this new generation, which you observe, which you grow investing at the moment into shares of the most profitable company. Advise them to look at Aramika as well. This is become possible to raise money as well. So those who made this choice last year actually benefited a lot. So what this generation brings, if you may, some kind of outline very quickly at the end. Looking at your own daughter and your son, what will they bring to the business?
I mean, I think I don't have anything to say that other people have not said, but I agree that their psyche is different, their values are different, their mindset is different, and they are the ones who are going to have to deal with the environmental chaos that we're creating now. And so as they come in as customers who choose not to buy because of our company's decisions, as employees who choose not to join because they don't get fulfillment or meaning, as investors who choose not to invest, they'll certainly have an effect. And I am very bullish on them managing the economy and making decisions that are more human-centered, more future-centered than we were. How big of a problem have we left them with? I don't know, but I'm hopeful that in their hands, they'll make better choices.
Great, Kaihan. Thank you very much. That was a great opportunity for us to listen to you, to understand your thoughts, and it was very practical advices. And those who were interested, would be interested just to look back and to go deeper into your recommendations, I'm sure will benefit. Thank you for joining the project. We appreciate it very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
I remind everybody that this lecture, this event was recorded and will be available. Please recommend your friends and colleagues to drop in and to learn how to outthink. Very difficult word, by the way, to translate into Russian, into Ukrainian, and also remind us that even we need to create our own words in order to become successful. That's important. So with this, I'd just like to remind everybody that our project will go on, and our next session will be just in 2 weeks, and our guest will be Ken Schmidt, a former director of communication of Harley-Davidson, the person who made money by biking, which is a great job, I believe, and will be a great opportunity to listen to his provocative presentations in our project just in 2 weeks. So with this, thank you very much, Kaihan, and for all our participants, thank you for joining us, and take care, and Slava Ukraini. Goodbye.
The war in Ukraine has changed the world, and now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project Reinforce UA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on reinforceua.com.